This is the Slots and Sockets Podcast, episode number 22. And I am one of your hosts, IRD Moose, and my partner in crime is...
Turbo Penguin.
You didn't hit the button. All right. So, kicking it off tonight, we've got a few interesting stories to talk about with the coming of the 9800X 3D launch, which we're supposed to see. Some sources have said the embargo lifts tomorrow. Some of them say they'll lift on the 7th. But we wanted to talk about some of the leaks that have kind of come hot and heavy over the past few days as we approach that. And starting off with AMD really kind of capturing a pretty big market share. And for the first time in its history, outselling Intel in data centers, which, considering their recent performance, I can't really say I'm all that surprised that, AMD's taking the top spot now in sales to data centers.
Yeah, no surprise. Absolutely none. They didn't have a very good offering. They were trying to market a two-socket, with a huge power increase against a single socket that was faster. And so, these are places that use so much power that power is something they actually do care about.
Yep.
So not only would that go, even if it was like for like, the power would have kicked them over to AMD. But, from a data center perspective, you got to think that, look, all of these data centers, if they're buying machines and buying servers, are going to have contracts assigned to them, service contracts.
Yep.
And it's my understanding that service contracts on Intel stuff coming out is running double the cost of AMD.
That's what I've been hearing, yeah. Because of all the failures with Raptor Lake and, Arrow Lake's performance. And, to your point, Intel's solution is two sockets to meet the performance that AMD is getting out of one, and AMD's part can also have two sockets. So you could literally get double the density of performance. You could put two servers into the space of one on a dual socket system.
Nobody's...
Yeah.
I don't think anyone's hugely surprised. I think this was, look, for enterprise and data centers, it's very black and white.
Yeah.
So, no real surprise there.
Yep. You either make the money makes sense, or you go to somebody else. So, kind of moving on to the AMD side of things, Gigabyte leaked out some news about some new parts from AMD in the 9000 series. We might see 16 cores of X3D.
Yeah. Now, what we don't know if that means all cores are going to have 3D cache, or if it's going to be the same as before. So we don't know quite yet. Speaking of Asus and Gigabyte, I was working on a system last night with the 7800X3D and updated the BIOS, and X3D turbo mode appeared.
Interesting. Yeah, we'd heard that was going to be a thing for 7000 series.
It is. And the interesting thing that I was looking at is that, so we were running Expo memory clock settings. So it should have been running 6000 megahertz at 40. So should have been 40 timings.
That's scooting.
After the reboot, it was running at 6400 megahertz at 32.
Ooh.
Now, I thought maybe that was a reporting error. So we got into Windows, turned on CPU ID, and lo and behold, he was running 32 clocks. Now, this is RAM we had struggled to get to run and actually downclocked because we were having some compatibility issues with it. Stability issues, and I thought it was maybe bad RAM, but this, I wouldn't say this friend just he's noob enough not to know or care. But
Right.
I was wildly surprised that stick of RAM we weren't able to really get working super happy on Expo settings is now overclocking on Expo settings. Not only the speed, but also I thought if it was 64 that maybe it had gone to like a 48 timing or had relaxed timings to get there for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And no, that wasn't the case either. So I was
It's just rocking and rolling.
pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
And with all the other, like we did a fresh reinstall, and legitimately that machine was running 25% faster on the CPU side. Like it had been a sizable increase. So even if you're on 7000 series, make sure you get those BIOS updates because it's super important. Really interesting thing that kind of caught my eye. Threadripper is said to have 3D cache.
Really? I had not seen
Apparently,
that.
apparently AMD is getting ready Threadripper and the next gen APUs with 3D cache. So,
Dude.
and that kind of leads into
Dude.
the next thing we were going to talk about was Strix
Wow.
Point.
Yeah.
Halo Strix Point. So Halo Strix Point is a legit thing. It's going to come out. It seems to me like you'll probably see a couple of workstations the end of this year, but really I think it's going to be next year where we see sites like the gaming side of this. And I don't care about workstations, but I care about gaming. But the notion is that you're going to have on-die memory of 64 and 128 gig variants. And that's going to be your video memory, and it's also going to be your system memory all on one. And performance, they're talking 4070 Ti performance. Now, what's interesting is that if you also add 3D cache, this alleviates some of the issues you're probably going to question of what about the bandwidth?
Yeah.
Because everything at that point, if you've got memory, GPU, CPU, NPU, all on one, I say chip, but I know they're chiplets.
It's almost an SoC at this point.
That's exactly where I was getting at. It's an SoC. What are you feeding into it? A Wi-Fi card?
I mean, you got the South
SSD?
Bridge and the PCI Express stuff, so I mean, it's some of those things will have maybe a modular GPU or even a dedicated GPU on the board. But if you got 4070 performance, you don't really need that.
Now the other weird thing at a Strix Point, it's strange that this week of all weeks we hear a bunch of Strix Point stuff. Is AMD quietly increased the memory specs on Strix Point.
Interesting.
LPDDR5X at 8000 megahertz.
That's
going to be look. There were some talks about this. This is going to be a really good, if it performs. Now I say if it performs. I don't know anyone who has it. I don't think anyone does have it. I think it's internal testing, and these are just leaks. So I take that with a grain of salt. But if the performance from what the leaks are talking about, it could be a very, very interesting part, because if it does kind of meet with these or even come close to a lot of these performance specs, the thing is, keep in mind, this is a 16 core 32 thread CPU. This is going to be a substantially powerful worktop, almost desktop replacement piece in a lot of respects.
Yeah.
Workstation. I can see why they're looking at workstation, but man, if you could go into this thing and it's going to be 2 chiplets, think if you could turn off a chiplet and only run 8 of those cores, save the power and save the heat. But then we were talking about this in the last episode. Steam Deck version 2. You've got Steam Deck. Well, what about Steam Machine?
Yep.
And we know that AMD is working closely with Steam on the Steam Deck. We know that they've worked closely on so many of these others with their Z performance. If you could put this onto a system, and I mean, you could get PlayStation 5 performance
In a laptop
in,
or a
in
handheld.
45 total watts. I
Yeah.
mean, that's really it. And then if
Yeah.
you really put a really good cooler on this thing and, made it actually somewhat beefy, that's a really interesting part on so many different forms.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can get 128 gigs of shared system memory, you now have a graphics card at a 4070 that can get 96 or 64 gigs of RAM.
Yep.
You know,
In a
so
in a laptop.
in a
Or in a
laptop
small form factor.
or a small form factor. So really, really interesting news. Now, I think the loaded question will be, what does that look like? And I really think that that's now, and you add in if you have 3D V cache. Now, the loaded question is if you're going to do 3D V cache on Threadripper with that many cores, the expectation is you're going to need more 3D V cache to feed that many cores.
Yeah.
So I don't think you're going to get away with 64, but could we start seeing like the next, big bump from AMD being Gen 3 of 3D V cache, like 128, 256 megabytes of, and get to the point where you really are doing a SoC where you're buying a CPU with your memory on board and you no longer have RAM.
Yeah, well, I don't think we'll ever hit the situation where we'll no longer have RAM on the big iron stuff and gaming PCs, but at the very least, it could make RAM optional for most people. Because if you can get up to 4 or 8 gigs, 8 gigs is enough, I would say, for the vast majority of people, and my mom runs just fine on 8 gigs. She's got 16 because that's what I had in the system when I built it. But what I see potentially happening is AMD moving this over to a system on the chip sort of model, and with Threadripper just like they're taking Intel out and behind the woodshed at that point. Because I mean, Intel doesn't have a product to offer in the high power desktop segment, and everybody's been begging for a new Threadripper. Because what was the last one we had? The 3000 series, the Zen 2?
2000.
Yeah.
2950X.
I thought it was the 30. I thought they had the 3950X too.
Either way, it's been a while.
But yeah, it's been quite a while. We didn't get anything for the last 3 generations of desktop CPUs, and I think a lot of that was coming down to AMD just more pushing the EPYC line, which Threadripper is basically EPYC for the home gamer. It's kind of the lower end of EPYC.
Micro EPYC.
Yeah. But the thing is like people have been begging for it for quite a while, and if they can do the 3D V cache in the new stacking like like I've read they have for the 9000 series, where the V cache is below the die and the die's on top, that's going to be a huge game changer when Intel has literally nothing to show for it to answer with.
I mean,
Intel literally released their bulldozer part just last week. So, are we going to get 10 years of Intel bulldozer?
I don't know. We'll see. I mean, the problem is that right now, you look at every segment and you sit there and you start asking your question, how can they come back?
Yeah.
I mean, they have failed at discrete graphics.
Yeah.
Unless something dramatically changes, they have failed. Their core gaming of PC gaming is failing.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see if they can turn that around. Now, the content creator stuff is okay, but I think everyone's now looking at this saying, okay, yeah, but realistically speaking, AMD has a far better offering at a better price.
Yeah.
So they failed there. The only thing that they're really good right now is, I mean, SSDs are not competitive, Wi-Fi. So they've got Wi-Fi, but even then, their Wi-Fi 7 only works with Intel stuff, and they're going to have a problem because there's going to be a push to get Wi-Fi 7 onto and on the newer AMD platform, so they'll have to cave on that because that's something they can actually sell. I mean, you start looking at saying, well, what can they sell?
Thunderbolt,
I don't know.
which AMD platforms are starting to support Thunderbolt now, which is good.
Oh,
but again, it's all stuff that they've had to license. They're having to license out because they couldn't make it work themselves. Everybody, who's made Thunderbolt work? Apple and Dell. They have Thunderbolt stuff that's actually useful. Pretty much nobody else does.
Halo Strix Point is being marketed against the AMD Pro, the Apple laptops.
Yeah, exactly.
They're called the Pro Max. So
if they put Thunderbolt into that, hello LAN party rig, because that makes the external GPU docks very much viable for even home
use. Don't need it. You don't even need it.
But that's
4070? Come on, you don't need it.
I want it though.
Dude.
I want it.
But you don't, but that's the problem. People don't need it. And
no, but there are people like me who want it.
You don't have one right now.
No, I know, and I want one.
Okay.
Hey, look, I will freely admit that I am the crazy, I want the shiny thing kind of gamer. It's just kind of how I roll. And then I keep that for a long time, get my money's worth out of it, and then buy whatever next new shiny thing there is a few years later. The only reason I'm looking at upgrading to an 8800 XT potentially is just because it's got better ray tracing performance than my 6900 XT. But with 3D V-Cache Gen 2, I mean, that in and of itself is a huge game changer. And the fact that they're able to push that some of those performance features down to the 7000 series and just be like, hey guys, here's an early Christmas present for those of you who bought our previous gen part, is, do you see Intel doing that? No. Nobody else really is. And so, AMD, I think, has taken this stumble from Intel, and outside of the marketing blunders that they've had, has run with it on the hardware side like gangbusters. And that, that's good. That's good to see.
Tomorrow's going to be the Intel. Tomorrow's going to be the big thing. Okay. The loaded question tomorrow will be, how does the 9800 X3D view fare in reviews?
Yep.
If champagne falls from the sky, then I think gamers are going to be perfectly fine with AMD. Mm-hmm. The X3D will save them from their marketing blunders from before.
Yep.
But let's be honest, it has to do well. Now, one thing that's really interesting is we've got a couple of quote unquote leaks where people release stuff a little bit early. And these look really good. The 1% lows and the 0.1% lows dramatically increased over. Now, the loaded question is this against the 9700X? So this is not the 7800X versus the 9800X 3D. Okay, so this is not that. This is a 9700X compared to a 9800X. And we don't really understand how well these systems were really put together. They were running a 4070 Ti. We know that. So look, until you have real reviews, just take this with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
But I'll say this, with the 0.1% lows, Project Cars 3 saw a 78% increase.
Yep.
Counter-Strike's 2, 29%. Starfield, 51% increase in the 0.1% lows.
Yeah.
I mean, what that's going to do is you're going to keep your stuff from doing this, where you're going up and down, and it's going to go up and down over here a little bit high, way higher. It's going to be a lot more stable, and the frames are just going to look really pretty. So, any games, Cyberpunk had an increase as well. Any game that is heavily CPU intensive, and I would make the argument that, or even heavily CPU dependent, any of those games are going to be very, very good. And I would suggest that older platforms might do a little bit better than brand new ones. It will be interesting to see reviews tomorrow from people who know how to properly do a review as to where those look at. But
yeah, because we don't know where the results come from, but yeah, I mean, having 0.1% lows and even 1% lows, because in some of those benchmarks, the 1% lows even improved, like in Project Cars 3, that was 25% on the 1% lows. 25% improvement and 1% lows means you're going to miss out on a lot of the micro stutter that you would have had with the 9700, which the 9700 is not a bad chip. It's just, it's showing the benefits of the 3D V cache and having a little bit higher core frequency. And, getting rid of that stutter is something that I work to do as much as I can, because when I'm playing a game, I feel the stutter, even if the frame rate says it's nice and smooth, I can feel it when it hangs. I can feel those 1% lows, and it drives me batty. And I'm crazy enough as it is. So, but yeah, I mean, the 9800X3D looks like it is going to be an absolute beast. And if this part legitimately does knock it out of the park, like some of the early results and a lot of the early the early leaked results that we've seen show, especially with some of the benchmarks and information saying that we're seeing upwards of 5.5 gigahertz on the core clock. It just sounds like good news all around. Unless AMD has an issue like what took out 13th and 14th gen for Intel, kind of hiding in the background, or the exploding 7000 series parts. It's literally AMD's game to lose at this point. And I have a distinct feeling that the reason we've seen kind of reduced numbers for the 9000 series is because everybody's been waiting for this part. I will freely admit that I have myself. Now, granted, I also have budgetary constraints, things like that in life that prevent me from buying all the hardware I ever want. But, this is another part that I'm seriously looking at, because I've got a 5800X that, it doesn't feel slow. It doesn't feel sluggish, but I kind of want to get on the bandwagon of some of the newer hardware and get on the newer gen stuff.
I think that there's a lot of people who are sitting around that in the past have said, well, there hasn't been anything crazy CPU side that's gotten me off the fence, right?
Yep.
Yep. If you look at Intel, 12th, 13th, 14th gen are just reiterations of the same thing, just, a little bit quicker and more, voltagey happy, and on an AMD side, the X3D has been the one thing that's really nice. But, the notion is that we're going to see, the real question I think how well this does now, with the notion that we're going to see some performance uplift with time as we get more and more maturity. If this really is a second gen V cache, it's going to get better. Yep. And I think that gamers need to realize that not only are you going to be able to get a 9800X 3D, but you're also going to have the ability. So like those gamers who got the 7800X 3D, like my buddy last night, he's like, dude, it's $470. It's done. He says, I can sell my 7800X 3D for a song and a dance.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, so it cost me what, $250, $200? Dude.
Yep.
That's the beauty about AMD with AM4 and AM5 is you sell your old stuff and go buy the brand new shiny thing, and you're going to get an uptick in performance. And I think that's where a lot of gamers are going to understand it. I think it's going to get a lot of at least understanding from that to say, maybe that first gen AMD sockets are going to be super popular because I can just go through that whole life cycle and get 2, 3, 4 generations of CPUs. It's very possible that we will see 2026 with AM5 processors, flagship processors, none of this like 5800 XT crap.
Yeah,
but
right. Well, and that on that note, I would say start trolling Craigslist and start trolling Facebook Marketplace on Friday, because we're going to start seeing parts. They're supposed to be hitting the shelves on Thursday, and by Friday we're going to see posts coming up: 7800X3D, 7600X3D, 7600X coming up.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Okay, if the new part, the new 9800X is going to 9800X3D is going to run $479, right?
Yep.
Okay, what's a good price for a 7800X3D?
What did it retail for? That was $450 for that one.
That was $450 for it.
Yeah. I'd say $225 would be fair.
I think you won't see him into. I think you'll be lucky to see him into the $3s.
You think? Okay. Yeah.
I saw one on Marketplace. Yeah, I saw one on Marketplace today, and they wanted $400, and I'm like, I wouldn't pay $400 for that, because at $80, I just go get a brand new one that's faster.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, where's a realistic number that I think is probably fair? I would say $320.
Okay.
But that's secondary. It's used on the used market, not new. What's crazy is that 7800X3D has been selling for that $480 on eBay and some of these places. So, either A, people don't know, or people just really want to get that because they know it's going to work really well. So, we'll see. Don't pre-order stuff. We'll probably, I think what we should do is let's have, maybe we'll have a short conversation tomorrow night about what we're seeing from those reviews on the 9800X3D, because I'd be very interested to see how good that really turns out to be. Yeah. So we'll see.
Tomorrow night, or were you thinking Friday night? Because
we'll see.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Sounds
if
good.
we do a show, you will see it. And on that bombshell.
Yep.
Thank you, everybody, for watching. Appreciate you giving us your time. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, do all the YouTube algorithmic goodness and fun stuff down in the doobly-doo below. And until next time, thanks for watching, and have fun storming the castle.
Take care.
Good night, everybody.